part of this human experience is experiencing it all and not closing ourselves off to the more difficult things. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. We are talking about grief, trauma, and loss again today. And more specifically, we're talking about grieving the old self. Now, what this means is when you go through things like change, it could be anything that is really heavy and transformative. We become new and different people. And part of that process is sometimes feeling like, gosh, the old me was so lucky in terms of she had nothing to worry about. She wasn't aware of just how maybe dangerous the world is or how deep and painful life can get. She was totally oblivious to the complexities of life. And I kind of feel for her and envy her a little bit because she was so much more carefree and innocent and trauma free than the present me. Hopefully, this is resonating and you're starting to understand what grieving the old self means. But yeah, this comes with a lot of grief, trauma, and pain. It's inevitable. It's inevitable that we become different people. We become new people when we go through things because these situations, they change us. They change how we interact with the world. They change the way we trust other people. They change our perspectives, our beliefs. We're never the same when we go through such hard parts of life. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, we hear people say, oh, you've changed, you're so different now. And usually that has negative connotations. But change is part of the process of going through life and becoming an adult and evolving and experiencing things like loss and trauma. So let's dive a bit more into grieving the past or old self and how that looks and feels. Grieving the old self is more about, it's like seeing our past self as a child and almost having so much empathy for our past self that we're almost parenting our past self. We kind of feel sorry for our past self, the fact that they've had to go through such difficulties in life. And when we're talking about ourselves here. So hopefully this is not confusing, but sometimes I look back at life, at my life, and I feel like, Rachel, I'm so sorry that you've had to go through this or that you've had to go through that. Like, that was so difficult. And this is so heavy, and life doesn't always feel fair. It's easy to feel like our lives are now blemished, like they're imperfect, like they're stained or tainted. I've mentioned the fact that my dad died in December, and it's quite surprising I've just said my dad died because I've been trying to avoid the word died because it makes it so much more raw and real, the fact that he's gone. I usually say he passed, but yeah, he died, he passed in December. And part of me is grieving my prior self in the sense of him going is the first death that I've had to experience in life, like the first person that I've actually been close to and known that's passed away. This is my first experience of death. Even though I'm in my mid-30s, I've been so lucky to not have to experience someone close to me pass away, but I'm experiencing it now. And part of me is grieving the old self where I'm feeling like, gosh, I was living in ignorant bliss. I was so like almost naive as to different stages of life. And yeah, looking back now, it's like, it was a benefit or a blessing in a way not to have had to experience death and loss earlier on. And I'm kind of grieving that old self who didn't have to know what death looks and feels like, and grieving the old self who didn't have to navigate pain and try and work through these really difficult and hurtful feelings, the grief, the trauma of my dad being in hospital, etc. So when we look back at our life prior to certain events, and when we think, she was so innocent or he was so innocent, almost a childlike innocence we had, we may feel like we are grieving our past selves. And what I want to really lay on today is the fact that doing that is okay. It's really common for us to feel or think like that after a significant life event. So don't tell yourself off. Don't, tell yourself, don't think like that. Just allow yourself to feel everything that is coming up for you right now. Stop trying to correct yourself or be a certain way. Just allow yourself to feel, be really authentic and honest with yourself. And what I found helpful is journaling my thoughts. So having a dedicated journal to write down what I'm thinking, and even to journal to my previous self and tell her that, I love her, it's okay, things will be okay. Just journal, write out some thoughts. Remember that we've gone through so much. Life is not easy. We've all gone through different types of trauma. I've only given you one example in terms of my dad passing, but there's been other things that I've experienced recently related to grief, loss, and trauma and pain. And you've gone through your own stuff too. But just know that this is hard. These are real difficult things that we're each having to navigate in life. And it's okay to feel the way that you're feeling. We have to be brave and strong. And part of that process will be wishing that almost you can go back in time and go back to your prior self that didn't know grief and loss and hurt. And it's natural to almost wish like you had someone to parent you. When you're having to be so responsible and look after not only yourself but others, sometimes you may grieve being able to be a child in a situation and having other people look after you. Now you're the person who's having to look after other people, even though you're hurting and you're trying to understand your feelings. So sometimes we're grieving that carefreeness that we had prior to these events, these things that we're experiencing. And that's okay. This is really about accepting that this is life. This is part of the human experience. And I mentioned in a previous video, a lot of us want to experience life to its fullness. And it's a bit unrealistic to think that an abundant life or like life in its fullness is just about the positive things. Life has its ups and downs, its ebbs and flows, its hard times, its more joyous times. And part of this human experience is experiencing it all. Experiencing it all and not closing ourselves off to the more difficult things. So, going through trauma, loss, pain, grieving our old selves, this is part of life. And we just have to go through it and grow through it. Life isn't perfect, it never will be. And one of the few things that are certain and guaranteed in this life is change. So we will constantly be changing. We will constantly be evolving and becoming a different person. We are evolving into the next phase of ourselves. these are internal shifts that we're experiencing, and they will give us new perspectives, new beliefs, new values. These experiences can add to us if we allow them to. Again, so many times we feel like traumas and loss and grief, they take away from us and they rob us of joy and hope and other things that we once had. But if we change our perspective, I guess become more open and more expansive, these seemingly negative experiences also add to our lives if we allow them. They allow us to experience life in a different way and on a different plane. They just help us to evolve and to become a fuller person, someone who has greater capacity to have empathy for other people who may be going through difficult circumstances as well. Or they just give us a different perspective, a new approach to life, a new appreciation for things that we perhaps once didn't even give much attention to. So there are different ways that we can see and experience these difficult stages of life. And it's all a learning curve, really, isn't it? Yes, life is happening to us sometimes, things totally unexpected happen to us and there's nothing we can do about it. We just have to try and adapt. But we have a choice as to the new person that we end up becoming as a result of the difficult situations that we experience. Life will never ever be the same how it was before. Like, that's guaranteed. You may not be able to feel the same sense of joy that you used to get from your hobbies, from going out, speaking with friends on the phone. All those things may just feel like really empty right now. But there will be a time when the things that used to give you joy again. Just trust the process and just focus on your healing. And I know this may also feel a bit like impossible right now, but if it wasn't for this very difficult experience you're going through, you may not ever develop these new qualities that are adding to your existence and making you into a more expansive person. So at some point in the future, part of you will be able to accept an element of gratitude to this difficult experience. Because again, you are becoming like a version 2.0 of yourself, and it's adding to your life, not just taking things away. So at some point, you'll be able to feel grateful for the new things that you are learning and the new person that you're becoming. Right now, that may not feel possible. It may not feel realistic, but at some point, hopefully you will. And that's something that we can look forward to as well. But overall, dealing with grief and trauma and loss, it's a process. We shouldn't rush the process, and there's no sin or shame in grieving our past selves, wishing for things to go back to how they were, and just thinking back at when life was much simpler, when life was free of pain, free of the thoughts of death and loss and embarrassment, failure. It's common and it's normal, and it's just part of the process. So I hope this video was of some reassurance to you today. If this describes some of what you're thinking and feeling, let me know what is on your mind. Leave a comment below. Like the video as well if you found it helpful. Let's continue these conversations. I will see you in the next video. Look after yourself, and we will speak soon.